Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by voiceover artists, we make your life sound more exciting than it is. Now let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everybody to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Dawn of the Wolf Part 2. The sequel to Dawn of the Wolf, but with way more dawns. Rent it now on VHS and Laserdisc. Welcome everybody to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers, writers. I've been a full-time writer-director for over a decade now. Lately, been doing a lot more writing and directing instead of just like, hey, can you show up and capture this interview? Like, that stuff is fun and there's an art to it. But it's so much more fun when you get to tell an entire story out of your brain dome. And so that's really fun. You've been a full-time producer for ages now. And I'm curious to hear what that path looked like to you. Like, I have my view of how Todd got into the producer game, but I'd be curious to hear some of your milestones and how you got to where you are. We've never heard this story on the show anyway.
Well, let's see. How did I get to where I am? That's a good question. I don't even know. So I've been a musician most of my life, and that's where most of my creative outlet had been. And then when I moved to Austin, how did I get? I don't even know how I got the job with Byron at
JJ Kent.
At JJ Kent. Oh, through Ryan Vaughn.
Mm.
Yeah.
Another musician.
So another musician friend of mine, Ryan, who went to the same college I went to. That's kind of how we knew each other. I don't even know how I know Ryan, honestly. Maybe I know him a little bit through playing music in college. But anyway, he hooked me up with a job where I met you, and that job. Then we got bought by a company that made a lot of content, right? I mean, we were handling content and managing, video uploads and stuff. This was back in the make as much content as you can days, right? Early to mid to late 2000s. And then we got bought by a company that made a lot of content, and they started or had a video team. And after working on content with them for a while in the kind of like SEO space and data collection space, I moved over to the video team because I thought that seemed really cool. I mean, I'd always liked movies, but it wasn't. I was very focused on music, and so I started managing their producers, and they had a bunch of producers around the country and a bunch of filmmakers around the country, and the whole thing was to marry them together. So a producer would work with a filmmaker on a project, and the filmmaker would give their finished videos to the producer. The producer would upload them and QA them and all that stuff. And it was actually a really cool system for like producing a lot of content. And so I helped produce that. I helped manage that team.
And by a lot of content, you're talking thousands of videos per month.
Thousands, yes.
Yeah.
Of really crappy videos a month. This was, yes. It was about volume, quantity, not quality. Yeah. 100%. So it obviously didn't last because that's garbage. Yeah. But I got a taste of what it felt like to actually produce and to work with other people to make something and video on video. And that was really cool. And then, while I was doing that, I was also acting on the side, and I got a couple of gigs at this company called Spiceworks, where I was a presenter, like on some of their videos, and I would, and so they had me in. We did the filming. They liked it. They called me back a couple of times, and it was great. It was a good relationship. Anyway, couple of years go by, and at this point, I'm managing a cryotherapy studio in Round Rock, Texas, because they had laid everyone off at our studio and I just needed to work because I had 2 children at that point. I still do. But, and then the head of that studio walks in to get a treatment. And I recognized him and I remembered his name. I said, Travis, how you doing, man? We struck up a conversation, told him I was definitely looking to get back into production. And not a couple months later, he hits me up and says, hey, we have an opening for a junior producer position. Or would you be interested? Absolutely. Yeah. So I was able to jump back in there. And now I've been at Spiceworks for over 5 years and really love it. I'm a senior manager of the whole creative services team now. And I just really love it. I enjoy it. So basically what I do is I produce not just all the video, but all the content we make, whether that's white papers or animations or websites or whatever. And I just love that because, well, one, you know, I think there's something to be said about producers knowing how things are done, but allowing other people to do it their way, right? So I'm not one of those people where I can just let you do what you do and not know how the sausage is made. I have to know how it's made. Like, even if I don't understand all the nuts and bolts and I don't understand all the detail, that's fine. Yeah. But I do want to know what it takes to do what you do so that I can convey what's needed to the people that bring it in order to make sure you have what you need to do what you do. And that's been a kind of a paradigm shift, right? Within my company, because before it was just, we were the middleman almost. The producer was the middleman and we would get the orders and then we would spit them out to the people that did the work and then they would do the work, spit it back to us. We'd give it back to the clients. Right. And I hate that. I hate that passive kind of like in between. There's almost no reason why you're there. You know, like I want to, so now all our producers, I manage our producers and all our producers are very hands-on with everything and they will give feedback to creatives. They know how to speak to creatives because creatives, you're a creative yourself. Somebody gives you feedback. There's a way to give feedback and to, and that's not criticism. Mm-hmm. That's almost welcomed, right? If you do it right. Yeah. You know, like and I'm not just talking about like how to engage with creatives. I'm also talking about like I can't give you a note of something if you didn't have the thing to build correctly in the first place. Right? So if you don't have, let's say, for example, we're making an animation for Dell. But they didn't give us a couple of the assets, right? And so our animator had to build them, right? Well, I'm not gonna critique the thing you built because they didn't give us what they said they were gonna give us. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say, great job at doing what you had to do with not having what you needed to do it. And then I'm gonna take it to the client and say, because you didn't give us what we needed, we just went ahead and did something. But we know that really what it needs to be is what you need to give us.
So don't come back and be like, this is wrong because of X, Y. Well, we're working with what we got here, people.
Right. And then also how you start a conversation with a client is how you start a project with the client is more important than any other conversation you ever going to have with them. Because it establishes the expectation. If I have a conversation with a client and I'm just thankful that they're there and that they're our client, that's not the way to go in. They need to be thankful that they're working for you. And you need to be the one to tell them what is necessary to give them what you know they want.
Yes.
Right? I know you want the best possible thing, and this is how we do it. You've got to get us this, 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 and this. Without those things, it's going to be less than that. So we'll do it. We can do anything. You know, the answer is yes, but it's yes and. Yes, and we require your access to your digital asset manager. Yes, and we require your logo and or your brand guidelines. Yes, but we require a logo lockup, if this is, co-branded with something else. All of these things are necessary from you. This is a give and take relationship. So anyway, that's a long roundabout story, but that's how I got started. I just kind of started making stuff. And then when I felt like the position I was in might either be degrading, or if the team that I was in or the space I was in was degrading or like not really holding water, I'd look for another place to move before that happened. And then I would move another place to the other place, and that would take a step farther. And then I would think, okay, what else do I want to do? Okay, well, I want to do audio. Okay, I want to learn that. So I'm going to learn that, and then I'm going to dip my toe into that in the space that I'm in so I can understand that. Okay, now I understand that. Now I want to produce websites. Okay, well, I got to understand the platforms that they use. I got to talk to engineers. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, now I want to figure out how to manage people. Like, what does that feel like? Oh, okay. So I could move over here and become like a junior manager or junior assistant over here, people manager over here. Okay. And I'll get that. And then all the while making sure that if I was doing something that was not part of the scope of my job, that everybody knew about it.
That's cool.
Because otherwise it didn't happen. If a tree falls in a forest kind of thing. Yeah. And I know I'm speaking a little bit corporate, but I think that's really important in all aspects, right? Whether that's corporate or that's creative. If you do something, if you go above and beyond in an edit, like in an animation, and you do something that took you like 6 extra hours, but you knew it was going to give you that extra 2 or 3%, right? You're going to call that out to the client, and you're not going to say, "Oh man, I put in 6 hours and I was sweating the whole," but you're going to say, "Yeah, I wanted to take this a little further, and so I normally wouldn't do this, but what I felt like I really wanted this to pop, and so I put in some extra time and I did this, blah blah blah," and then they feel taken care of, right? But if you don't tell them that, they don't know, and so why would they think that what you did? They don't know how you do what you do. Why would they think that what you did was any more or less than what you did for somebody else?
Yeah, it's not uncommon for me to, in my invoice, insert all these things that I didn't charge them for, so that it's a zero line item, but I insert it so that they can see, hey, Wes didn't charge us for XYZ. Nice. And it's just a slick way. It's very, non-confrontational and just like, hey, just a heads up. Here's all these extra things that you got without lifting a finger. And so congratulations.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's a nice little touch.
Yeah. I am curious, because there is something you didn't mention that I was curious if it played any role in, which is what you were doing outside of your job. Because whenever you and I started creating stuff like for your band, and you at the first music video, I think you were still managing the community of writers. But before that, before you and I started creating anything, you had already shot some music videos. You'd already been doing creative work. And then, of course, you and I started making stuff. And I feel like, I certainly was able to use what I was doing with you. And I just, me, I poured my absolute heart into everything we did. And so I'm curious, all that stuff, that first music video. And then by the time we shot the short film Threads, I want to say you were starting to dovetail. Everything was kind of this weird wishy-washy place at Demand Media at the time where we were working. And so I don't know how closely you were already managing producers at that point, or if it was just this weird hodgepodge. I don't know. I'm just curious if any of the stuff that you were doing outside with me, with your acting, other stuff, how much of an influence or impact do you think that made on your ability to kind of jump into these new roles, being more and more and more creative? Because initially, I mean, this is why I left my job at Demand Media, is they wouldn't let me be creative. And so I was like, all right, well, I got to go. And then of course y'all started hiring me to do creative shit. And it's like, y'all could have had all this in house, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. That's a great question. I mean, I honestly, I thought, we were just tying this to film, but yeah, it all, well,
I think it all adds in to me, like every part of my my career and every time I think about what I would advise people to do is, it's what you said a minute ago, which you were alluding to at least, of, yeah, okay, you want this thing, but you need the experience first. No one's going to pay you to do something that you can't do already. And so it's finding ways to grab that experience. Yeah, managing people, fine. Maybe you can't just jump to manager, but maybe you can manage a sub-community of people. And now you can demonstrate, yeah, I have leadership capability. I can keep everyone on task and happy. Like that's a lot to juggle. And so finding ways to build your portfolio, your resume out in ways that, fine, maybe this isn't my job right now, but I can go in my downtime and create something. I can go create this experience for myself that now is in my resume. And I don't know if that played any impact on your journey as a producer. I was just curious if it did.
Oh, totally. I mean, like, there's something that I really love about, and I think that any producer would say the same thing about putting pieces together, right? And the pieces could be getting a creative something that they need, or it could be putting people together, you know, or it could be just like it could be finding locations. It could be putting something together so that whenever it's done, you can say, oh my gosh, if I hadn't done this, 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 and this, that would not have happened. And that feels really, really good. And I think that any producer of anything, whether that's film or music or whatever, probably feels the same way. So like for Threads, I had been like honestly producing my band for years.
Good point.
Like,
yeah.
If I didn't do the thing didn't get done. And that meant everything from, I mean, we wrote together, but like if I didn't write lyrics or melody, like it didn't happen. Finding money to record, actually recording, talking to the people like that, to studios, finding the best deals. We had to get mixing, we had to get mastering, we had to do artwork, we had to do photos, we had to do, you know, like online presence, like all of everything, like tours, booking shows. I mean, I could keep going, and it was everything. It was all consuming, debilitating volume of work. And I did all of it. And if anybody in my band wants to say otherwise, they can come talk to me, because I'm telling you, I did it all. I mean, there would be one-offs here or there where the guys would do something.
Yeah,
but
I don't think, just from an outsider's perspective, I don't think there would be any contestation, just because the minute you stop doing things, the minute the band stopped being.
Oh, good point. Yeah. But so that felt not good, because, you know, it was a band of multiple people all going to the same goal, and to have one person doing everything just didn't feel good. But to all that being said, I had that experience of just do it. Right? The Nike thing, just do it. You just have to do it. If you don't do it, it doesn't get done. And that's the attitude that you have to have as a producer, or as a people manager, or as anything. So when we had Threads, I loved the idea, and I thought we had such good people working on it that I wanted to care for it. I wanted to take care of it. I wanted to do everything that could possibly be done to make sure that it was as good as it possibly could be, right? Because it wasn't just the video too. It was this music that was like everything we had gone into that, right? And so why would I let it fall flat? You know, having a great crew and this music that I loved, and our friends, you know, doing this, you know, so I put everything I had into it, and that felt really good at the end of knowing, man, you know, like I helped make that happen. That's fantastic. And that's how I feel about everything that we make now. And you know, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, very cool. I mean, it's always a weird story of how anyone starts a career, especially one in the creative industry. Like right now, I'm submitting to a bunch of interesting fellowships, and it's so competitive. I don't expect to actually win any of them, but no risk, no reward. And so anyone that's whether they're an actor, a director, but especially a screenwriter, it's just such a weird, there is no one path. And that's kind of my point, is your story is weird because it's yours. And any other story that you're going to hear is also going to be weird because it's going to be so unique and specific. And so if you have a dream or a goal or a passion that you're trying to, make a living out of, or just, pursue for the fun of it, it's always going to take these weird bumps in the road. And as long as you're figuring out, how can I figure out this next step? It's about the small steps. It's not about the big leaps. And if I can just find those small steps, and they'll all add up to this bigger goal. And hearing your story, I think, is really illustrative of that. And I've told my story a number of times, and maybe I'll tell next week during the preamble. I've just been thinking about my earliest experience as a storyteller, and I think that'll be fun to
great.
run through.
Heck yeah, I want to hear that. I mean, the last thing I'll say is that, like, you gotta like what you're doing at the time. It doesn't mean that it has to be what you do forever, or that it in fact, it's almost better that it's not, because then, in 5 years, then you are this well-rounded person that can do a lot of things. And that's way better than somebody who's great at one thing. Yeah. Let me be very clear about this. If you're great at one thing, you're only great at one thing. Think about this, right? But if you're good at a lot of things, you can do so much more, right? So it's okay to bust your butt at something, learn a lot about it, do as best you can, overachieve. And then if you don't feel it anymore, move on to something else. Or if you have an opportunity somewhere else, then take it. You don't have to stay in one place. You're not a tree, right? But while you're doing it, love it, right? And then you'll get much farther. You'll put more into it. And I really think that it's whatever. You get out of life what you put into it. Anything that you're doing, you get out of it what you put into it. And it might feel like you're not getting anything out of it at some point, but that might be because you're not putting enough in. And it might feel like you're putting a lot in, but feeling has nothing to do with the real world.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm where I'm at least professionally, because I have overachieved on purpose because I like what I do.
Yeah.
Right. I will over deliver. I will overachieve. I will over communicate. I will like all of that stuff, not because I want to make more money. I know I'm not going to be rich doing what I do, but because I like it, and because I like the feeling of knowing, man, I did that. And if I wasn't here, that wouldn't have gotten done to that caliber. Yeah. So if you have that attitude with whatever you're doing, you're going to eventually be successful. It's going to come back to you. Yeah,
I love that. Being well-rounded is so good. And this will be, we'll move on after this, but the last comment is, it's the old adage has always been, right? Jack of all trades, master of none. And I've always heard there's a little addendum that people leave out, which is, jack of all trades, master of none, better jack of many instead of just one. And it's like, it's the idea of like, you can do so much more if you can do so much more. And there's something beautiful and amazing about people who are complete masters of the one thing that they love. Like, yeah, if I could go have sushi made by Hiro in Japan in the subway, like, I want that experience. But if I'm, living here and trying to achieve a number of things, I might need to take on a lot of hats until I can just focus on the one thing that, brings me the most pleasure. But luckily for me, I get, I really enjoy so many things that, I do in the work that I do. And I know the same applies for you. So thanks for sharing that, man. I love hearing,
Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Nice.
So today we are covering Cyrano, the 2022 version, with Peter Dinklage. So if you haven't seen this, please pause this episode, go watch it. It is streaming on Amazon Prime. Yes.
For sure. We'll look at a few things, some of the cinematography and directing, creating a moment of love. We'll look at some of the story and writing, inevitable death on stage, the pacing and structure. And again, spoiler alert, I also want to touch on the importance of tragedies as a storytelling device or genre, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. Too self-conscious to woo Roxanne himself, wordsmith Cyrano de Bergerac helps young Christian nab her heart through love letters. Directed by Joe Wright, screenplay by Erica Schmidt, adapted from the stage musical by Erica Schmidt, based on the play by Edmond Rostand, and cinematography by Seamus McGarvey. That's the best name ever, by the way.
Seamus.
Seamus.
Yeah. Seamus.
Oh, Seamus?
Yeah.
Is that how you say that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say Seamus. I think Seamus is better. Featuring Peter Dinklage as Cyrano, Haley Bennett as Roxanne, Kelvin Harrison Jr. as Christian, and Ben Mendelsohn as Guiche.
The way I feel is like falling stars diving into cold ocean waves. Words can only get me so far, but they cannot describe the way that it hurts. 'Cause every time I see you, I am overcome. I try to tell you how much I need you. But I turn and run.
Your letters to me are like music.
They're just a mask in a lonely coward's game.
What is it you're so afraid of losing?
And I might lose everything if I lose the pain. 'Cause every time I see you, I am overcome.
It makes you laugh to think someone like me could keep someone like you. Look what I've become.
Okay, man, we've made no secret over the course of this show that we don't do musicals. We don't like them. They're the musicals, quote unquote, that we like aren't really musicals or dramas with music in them. And so I'm curious, like, for you, does this make it past the hurdle of being an actual pure musical and something that you can enjoy?
Yeah. And let me say a couple of things. First off, I think that it's fun. Okay. I think that Haley Bennett is fantastic, and I want to see her more in a lot of other things. I think that her performance is really, really great. I think that Peter Dinklage is fantastic in this film too. Obviously, Ben Mendelsohn is perfect. You hate him, which is perfect. He's always the role that you hate, which means that he's good actor. So, okay, knowing that this is adapted from a play, right? I can see this as a play.
Yeah.
So I'm watching it from a play standpoint. I'm watching it from a almost like we are locked into this space, and everything that is going to happen within this space. Like if you watch like a normal film, there is no kind of walls or kind of, you feel like you could go everywhere or be anywhere or do anything, right? But in this film, it's very much scenic, like meaning we are in this space we are going to stay for a certain amount of time. I mean, the play in the opening, I guess, not the opening, but like the first play in the theater, we are in this scene, we're always facing one direction, right? We come in, facing the stage, but then pretty much it's like stage right for most of the time, unless we're looking at Roxanne, right? It's very staged.
Yeah.
And then after that, when we're in that kind of courtyard area where Cyrano is talking to his friend, and there's the steps and everything, like it's very set up like it would be on a stage.
Yep.
And it almost feels like that all the time, where we're in this space, and this is where we're going to live. There are some times where we're in multiple spaces when a song is playing, but that's because they're singing to each other from a long distance, and it kind of has to be. But
for the most part, it is. We kind of set up a scene, and then we kind of hang out in a space. Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
yeah, just like the clip you played. Where we're just always in this space, and we stay here. So watching it from the point of view of let's look at this like a play. Like I imagine sitting in a theater watching this on a stage. All of a sudden it has a different feel. All of a sudden it feels like, oh, this is adapted for the screen rather than I'm trying to make this into a movie. And so I thought that they honored that really well. It felt good. It felt like, like I was watching a play, there were different acts. I could feel the changes. And it felt really good. I will say some, and also the music was very play-like. It was very, that's how I got through it too. Like if I was just watching a musical, I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's a little corny. Right. But if I imagine this being on a stage and me being in a theater, it would be beautiful. It would be like, very poignant, very on point. This is what I'm saying to you. Rather than being a little bit more cryptic, like a lot of musicals, might be at some point. But anyway, so coming at it from that point of view of this is a stage adapted script, and I'm watching it like a play, I thought it was really enjoyable. And there were a couple of, I didn't like all the music, to be honest.
Same,
in fact, I didn't like most of it.
Oh, wow.
But I did like that. Yeah, I did like that song, Overcome.
It's very The National, isn't it?
Oh, so in fact, on the ending credits, is that The National?
Yeah.
Okay,
he
I
wrote
knew
the
it.
Music, yeah.
Okay, I knew it. I knew he was singing because I was like, I recognize that voice, and I meant to go look it up to see, is that The National? I'm pretty sure. What I want to ask you is, did you recognize him?
Recognize him? There was one person that I recognized that wasn't, obviously like Haley Bennett and Peter Dinklage, I recognized, but I recognized in the war, the redheaded dude from Once.
Glenn Hansard. Okay, that's who I was asking.
Okay, yeah. It's his eyes and his teeth, the way his lips and teeth kind of go together. That was like, oh yeah, I know that guy. I have to memorize very specific features on people.
Okay.
But yeah,
I just wanted to make sure because the second I saw him, I was like, I wonder if Wes is gonna spot him.
It makes me really warm and fuzzy every time I do recognize someone and get it right. I'm like, hey guys,
you got it right, man. So the two songs that I loved and that stuck with me were that one and were Overcome, and was the one during the war that Glenn Hansard sang or started singing, Heaven is Wherever I Fall. Unreal how beautiful that was. I mean, I also loved how the camera work treated it very much like a play too.
Yeah.
And where we hung on things a long time, we let actual emotions kind of like sit there and almost a little awkward, like it would be on a play, but even more awkward because we're forced to look at Peter Dinklage while he processes something, instead of, if it was a play, we could look at Roxanne and we could look at Cyrano at the same time. No, we are looking at just Cyrano right now. And then, or in the scene where Glenn Hansard is singing at the end there, Heaven and Wherever I Fall, we are just hanging on him while he's singing. We're not cutting away. We're not doing inserts. We're not punching in. We're not pulling out to reveal wide. It's just him. And we do that for each of the three soldiers. And I just adored that way of filming, to honor the play, by not trying to cut around and turn it into a film. And that song just ripped me apart. Each guy having a different reason to write a letter, explaining it, and just so good right before they go to war. And then, it's really good.
That song is so amazing to me because it does something most movies don't do, which is step away from our main characters and humanize people in a war. Like, these are just random guys. We've never seen them before. We're clearly never going to see them again. But suddenly the war starts to have a lot more weight emotionally to it, because now you're starting to get to know people that are on the front lines, that are going to their death. They know it, and this is their goodbyes. Glenn Hansard, his letter is to his wife, and then the next guy is like,
kids.
Yeah, and his kids, his sons, right? And then the next guy is like, I have a girl. And, he sings to his girl. And then you're like, okay, is this all about that kind of love? The third guy, I have a father. Yeah. And he starts talking about how maybe he's not the best dad, but I love him anyway. Whoa.
Yeah.
That's real. Like, people have complicated emotions with people they love. And exploring that right as they're about to go to their death. How cool is that? And then there's a shot. Oh my God, bro. The shot where they do start marching into war, and the guns are going off. And there's this brief 3-4 second shot of a soldier getting hit and falling and being immediately replaced by an even younger soldier. Like, he steps right into his place. It's so heartbreaking and beautiful. And they cut away. They don't linger on it. They don't pound it home. Instead, you have to ruminate on it. You're just like, what did I just see? Oh my God. And it just suddenly, war becomes this really bitter pill for everyone. And yeah, I came into this movie hating war, but it's so much easier whenever they throw these ideas at you so covertly, without berating you over it. And then, of course, at the end of the film, we have this unrequited love suddenly, gaining foothold, and he can't experience it. And that's a whole other message of the film. But it is also because of war. It's not just because of his pride. War stole something from both of them. Yeah. What did you think? So for me, the music, there's maybe 2 tracks that don't really work for me. The rest really work for me. For me, it works really well when it's playing into the melancholy, when it's trying to do this more upbeat thing, or the Guiche song whenever he's marching back to interrupt their marriage. That doesn't really work for me. As far as it does work, it's because it's been Mendelsohn. It's not because that music and this kind of whatever Scar taking back the kingdom kind of bumpiness march. That starts to feel a little too musical for me. Same thing towards the beginning, where they're kind of playing with this hip hop tone. They don't go full hip hop, which I appreciated, but they dance close enough to it where I'm ejecting while Cyrano is berating the actor on stage, and they're going, and he has that whole with the other guy, and I'm just like, oh, okay. And so my first time watching this, I'm like really getting into it, and then she starts singing in the carriage, and I'm like, oh God, why is she singing? and so it takes until the baker, the song in the bakery is whenever it starts winning me over, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting. and then the
Yeah.
song with the soldiers. And there's that beautiful, it's a brief shot. Again, these brief shots that they hit you with without like, belaboring. It's just so wonderful. But it's this shot where we see the soldiers dancing from above. It's the aerial shot, right? Where the water is surrounding the barracks and they're all kind of flowy. And I'm like, oh man, that's beautiful. Like you could also make a version of this movie without any dancing. And I'd probably love it a little bit more. But the fact that they still find these moments of absolute beauty, it was like, okay, you know what? I love the music enough. I'm head over heels on this story. And I think those two things were enough to like really pull me all the way in, especially from the moment of the baker, the confession of her love to him, and that heartbreaking sequence of him thinking he's talking about her and realizing she's not. And it's like, oh, I was committed, I think, from that moment forward. Up until that point, it was like, I don't know. It's Peter Dinklage. I'm going with it. And then finally, it was just kind of pushed me all the way in. Were there other moments for you that was like, oh, this is really working for me, and I'm feeling, the emotional weight of it all?
I mean, the scene you talked about when she confesses her love for Christian to Cyrano and at the bakery, and he's just demolished but can't say it. Like, that was such a great performance by Peter Dinklage. I mean, how do you play that? I mean, that you almost have no, you don't have any lines really. It's all in your face. But if you've got to make it, it's so weird because you've got to make it believable to people watching you, but not to the person who you're acting with or to the character you're acting with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's like one of the hardest, I would imagine, one of the hardest scenes to deliver, like something like that. I mean, we know that he loves her, but we need to see the pain without him showing the pain too much to her. And I thought he did just an amazing job. Let me see.
How about his voice? How about that dude's voice?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's great. Like they're really singing.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a 70-30 thing. Some of these musical sequences are in studio and they're syncing, but some of them, like the scene we played, I would be nearly 100% sure that was like them performing into camera. Yeah. Right? Yeah, and then
I totally agree. I think most of it was actually sung. I mean, after when he starts singing after he leaves and they're gonna get married, I can actually hear the tone change when he turns his head. Yeah, right? Like, right. I can literally hear that that was one moment where I was like, oh, okay. Yep. I heard it. I noticed that everything is perfectly in sync. It's not, it's pretty obvious. I mean, I'm very sensitive about those kinds of things.
Same, but it's such a major, major difference when an actor can be in the moment singing and you can see the cracks in their voice, the hesitation right there on their face, and it's all realized right there. To do that with a track, you have to predict what your performance is going to be on the day. And so you're in studio imagining, I'm going to perform it this way. And we're just too good at reading faces. Like, when someone is sinking because you can't create these little tiny moments. Like we're in the war in the cave, and we're watching Glenn Hansard and the other two guys. They're breaking their voice. They're doing these little minor hesitations that are just a hair off beat, and then right back in it. Like, they're doing all these tiny things that you can only do into camera. You just can't predict it in the studio.
Yep. And even if you try your damnedest, it's not going to be the same. Even if the performance is the same, the timing isn't going to be the same. And even if they perfectly sync it up in post, it's still not the same. There's learning something from Les Mis, learning something from Once. Like, those are on another level because of those things, because that extra, and I know it's very hard to do, I think the way they did it in Les Mis is they actually sung it on set and then they scored
That's right. I think you're right.
Symphony after it to the picture, right? So because there's ebbs and flows with timing and everything, and I'm sure that that's harder, but it's so worth it. And when you have the ability to do that, and you've got actors and that can actually sing, take advantage of that. Like that, you're never gonna get that perfection in post. You're just not. It's not, and it's also, it's not like CGI where it's like getting better every time, like every year. Like, no, it's really not. And honestly, maybe CGI isn't getting better every year. if we're being honest, you watch the original Jurassic Park and tell me that anything we've done since is better. But yeah, so I love that they actually sung into camera, and they went that extra mile. And also, you know, this is supposed to be adapted from a play. You're not going to sing in post 90% of the stuff and then just play it back. No, you're going to actually sing on stage. And so they honored that. And I loved that. I adored it.
God, it's so good. Yeah, I'll run through a few notes. I think I was head over heels. I was just really happy that I finally watched a musical that I was excited to watch again. And it was funny whenever, you know, we committed to doing it, I was like, what if I don't like it the second time? And then once I got into it, once the bakery hits that scene, I was like, I could live here for a while. And really, I could hang out with those three actors, Dinklage, Haley Bennett, and Kelvin Harrison Jr. Like them all three together working is just, there's so much chemistry. It's just amazing to me. Yeah. Cinematography and directing.
And I love, can I say one more thing? I love how they had not just a bunch of white people, but they never called out any race at all. Like the fact that Christian was a black guy was never even part of the conversation. It had nothing to do with anything. It was just, she loves him, he loves her, he doesn't know how to speak, Cyrano does. And it was just that. I thought that was so good because I was waiting at some point, because I didn't know the story. I was waiting at some point for someone to say, oh, you know, yeah, that black guy or whatever. But nobody ever called anything out. It just was. So
I love that. We need so much more of that, where we can just do a period piece or anything, and if it isn't rooted in that, you know, race topic, then just leave it alone. Let people be people. We're still all just human beings. And I find it ridiculous that, you know, you can make so many films, and we'll make so many more that address that. And we need that. We also need to see people just coexisting. I think that's even healthier, to live in that kind of world visually, so that we can mentally project it, you know, into our own lives. Yeah. So cinematography and directing, I think, one of the things, and you mentioned it already, and I love it, was some of the stillness that they were sitting with, like the singing on the steps with Lebret. That's the moment you were talking about at the beginning, where he's just made his confession. Lebret was reading his face, and he was like, just come off it, bro. Like, we know. And Dinklage is like, fine. Yeah, what of it? And then, you know, he kind of starts that his heart song, which is to love someone madly. And there's that moment where they're on the steps together, and we just hang out on this one shot. We stick there. And I love it. There's no unnecessary camera movement or cuts to, you know, quote unquote, add visual interest. There's none of that. And I love it because there's too many shows and films that move the camera just to have that visual interest. And I think it too often undercuts the moments where it would have an actual impact on the story to move the camera, because that exists too. And if you don't do it with intention, you know, as often as you can, then you're stealing thunder from yourselves. And I wish, especially TV shows are really bad about this. They'll just, you know, throw something on a steady cam and just move, just keep moving, no matter what, just keep moving. I'm like, why? Like, it looks better. We're going to have, 4 minutes of conversation, and we don't think people are patient enough to sit and listen to this conversation. Well, first of all, you probably need to rewrite it then, because that means your characters aren't doing anything interesting enough to engage the audience. And start there. It's just frustrating. I love this film being so patient with that, which I think is echoed again. And to hammer it home, that scene where Christian and Roxanne at the beginning-ish, see each other in the crowd, right? There's this nice, beautiful moment where they don't talk, and we know absolutely that love is in the air. And I want to just kind of break out how they did that, which is there's this really nice slow push on both of them, right? We see a nice slow push on Roxanne and a reverse of one on Christian, and we hold for a really long beat. And what they do is they silence everything, like all the crazy theater noises, the singing, the song that's going on goes dead quiet. And we've also stilled the camera, because up until that point, we have been moving the camera, whipping it around all over the place from the opening shot. It's been nothing but move, until we got to that moment with Lebret and Cyrano. And then we're back on. Oh no, that's even after the scene, actually. So maybe even all the way up until this moment, the camera's been moving through the theater with Cyrano challenging the actor on stage to fighting Valverde. And now suddenly it's just still. And without a word or sound, we know that they're crazy about each other. And it's the absence of all the movement and all the sound that creates that. And so some films get too focused on motion for motion's sake, or dialogue to explain what you're seeing, when absolute stillness speaks far clearer, more clearly than anything you can say, any camera movement that you could do. Just let everything stop. The world suddenly stops, and it's emotional. Of course we get it, right? And that stillness is in contrast to all the movement and the music, so it just pops out so easy. Yeah, I adore it. Yeah, great camera work here. The war, cinematography wise, I love how underexposed it is. I mean, they really push all the whites down into the exposure. It's beautiful. It creates this really cold, bitter texture to everything on screen, because it feels like winter, right? Winters get overcast, and it just feels like the sun is so far away, and it's just absolutely perfect. And all of this, that whole war sequence, the song and the conversation, the coldness, the visual elements, it creates this really amazing sense of inescapable doom. Like we are marching toward deaths, and it's just all coalescing in this really beautiful visual and sonic, I think, story of death. And it's just perfect. Story and writing wise, at the beginning, there's the death on stage. I think they do a really great job of making it feel inevitable. That's the scene where Cyrano kills Valverde. And it's a tricky thing, because having your hero kill someone could lose the audience. And you don't want that. You don't want your hero to be a bloodthirsty, garbage man. You want it to feel like, oh, this was inevitable, and we love our hero for it, not despite it. And I think they do a good job. Right when we start that sequence, Cyrano is threatening the stage actor, right? He's telling him, hey, you got to go. Well, if you're not going to go by invitation, then I'll do it by force and violence. And now we've loaded the gun. A threat has been made, right? That's you've shown a gun, you've cocked it back, and you've pointed it. We need to see that gun go off. That's the first step. And then the next step is the actor flees, right? He literally rips through the stage in order to get away from Cyrano. And so there's almost a sigh of relief, like, okay, well, no one's going to die. Maybe this isn't that kind of story. Don't move so quickly, because then Valverde jumps on stage and challenges him to a duel. And of course, Cyrano beats him after they have that fight with words and swords. But Cyrano's going to let him live. He's begging this guy almost to live. And the guy concedes. Cyrano walks away. And with his back to him, right, Valverde tries to kill him again, right, in a really crappy way, right, a dishonorable way. And now, and of course, you know, Cyrano isn't, you know, anybody's fool. He kills him. And it's nice because it's not Cyrano attacking him, it's him being attacked, and it's the weight of the attack that kills him. If he had stopped at any point, this guy would not have died. And it was his own volition, his own force of will that took his life. And so we love Cyrano for his boldness, but also for his attempt at mercy. And up until that point, there was just too many threats to not let that loaded gun go off. And so it does feel inevitable that someone's going to die. There was just too much threat of violence and too much confrontation going on in that moment to let someone get off scot-free. Beautifully, beautifully handled, I think. The pacing and structure of this thing, I think, is really fantastic, especially when you start to, you know, realize where we're at in certain points of the film. We open by meeting Roxanne and her predicament, her handmaiden. I don't know what the relationship is with between that woman and Roxanne, but she says it perfectly, right? She says, because Roxanne is over here, you know, singing about love and how much more she would prefer love than obligation or, you know, whatever this thing is between her and de Guiche, and her caretaker says, children need love, adults need money. So there's this practical application that's being applied. Like, do you go after what you want, or not? Do you go with the thing that you need? And so Roxanne is now having to answer this question: which needs should be met? What does she really value the most? And that's a question that she's going to have to answer at some point in this movie. And then from that sequence, we meet Cyrano, right? And we soon discover his predicament, that he loves Roxanne, but doubts her ability to love beyond his looks. And it's so good because LaPret calls him out. It's so good. He says, because Cyrano is going very romantic about, you know, how much he loves and understands this woman. And LaPret's like, well, why don't you confess? He's like, no, she could never love me. And he's like, well, you don't have a very high opinion of her then. Mm-hmm. That she has the depth to see beyond your unique physique. So good. Such a great, you know, a message. That,
unique
you know,
physique. That's right. He was like, because he paused there.
Yeah.
And, you know, yeah, I remember that.
It's so good.
And to your point though, too, when the caretaker said, you know, kids need love, adults need money, and we have none. Like, that helped me, because I cannot, there's one thing I cannot stand. It's watching films about the elite British in the 1800s. Like, it is the worst. It is so contrite and just blah. I cannot relate to those people. So we've established that she has no money, or they have little money, even though she's got like a, you know, what seems like a lavish closet and is in a beautiful dress and stuff. But that was an important line for me as a viewer to know, okay, it's not like she has endless amounts of money. She's not like the elite, but, you know, she's not destitute, I guess.
And they do a great job later on of reminding us whenever de Guiche is like, go get us some tea. And Roxanne shoots her a look, and she's like, we're out of tea. Like, they can't afford tea, sir.
Yeah, exactly.
It's perfect.
So anyway, just want to point that out. But yes,
nice.
Good, great points.
And so we go from meeting Roxanne to meeting Cyrano. Then we meet Christian. We meet him last after we've emotionally invested in Roxanne and Cyrano. And so now we're introducing what could be an obstacle, and he is, but they need to do that. They need to make us feel like we need to see Cyrano and Roxanne together. And then we meet Christian. They also need to win us over with him, because he's not someone that we hate. And so they introduce this fighter, but he's got a really big heart. And so they've kind of set the stage for this great love triangle. And we go from there, right, to immediately they strike an agreement, Cyrano and Christian. Cyrano will write the letters, right? And it's so good, because this is the whole conceit of this film, is right here, is Cyrano is going to confess his love to Roxanne via Christian, and it's taken us 45 minutes to get to this point. That's really patient, and you really do need that much time to establish these other characters and their world and the love and all the stakes that are emotionally right there on the surface, and also some of the other stakes that you were just talking about with, like, she's broke and we need to believe that she's broken, or else we may not really care about her at all if she's just using people, because that's not attractive. And so they take us nearly 45 minutes to get to that point, which is almost halfway through the film. And so the pacing this way builds our emotional need to root for almost everyone involved. But then, especially Cyrano and Roxanne, and then they have Christian sing Roxanne's heart song, right? This thing that's the deepest part of your wishes. And he sings the song that she sang at the beginning. And it makes us start to love Christian, because now we're at a conflict. Is their love inevitable? He's a really good guy and we love Roxanne, but what about Cyrano? And so there's this really great conflict of, how do we see this resolution coming to pass in a way that we're really happy? And it just feels impossible, which, as we've said a time or two, is the perfect place to put the audience in an impossible to resolve situation. And then, of course,
to that point, just for a second,
please.
To that point, like, I liked that he, he's not dim-witted. He's a smart guy. But he says he's not eloquent, and yet he sings these songs that are eloquent. Like, when he's not around her, he's eloquent. He does have a vocabulary. He does have love for her, and has a way to express it, or can express it. But when he gets in her presence, or is required to put it down on paper, he just can't. He loses it. And I actually like that. That feels very real world to me. I think that we're all capable of so much more until we're asked to do that. And then all of a sudden, all of this fear and doubt comes into our mind. She's not going to like me. She's not going to like what I say. I don't know what to say. I'm going to write something stupid. Everybody's going to laugh. And that is debilitating and gets rid of all of our creativity. And the brilliance of this is that it showed us that he can, but he just is falling victim to his own fear, whereas Cyrano is able to actually use that to be more of himself, and that's what he's able to put down on paper and say when he's singing to her in this clip that you showed. So anyway, just wanted to point out that I actually liked that he is eloquent and just feels like he's not. So.
That's so good. And from there, Cyrano's already written his first letter, and he hands it to him, and he delivers it to her. And that first letter kicks off another song that's it's almost a music video. I mean, it basically is. You could cut that 3.5, 4 minutes, and it really serves really well as a beautiful music video of the three of them all singing together. And it's so good because I think a great musical, what it tries to do is finds ways to use songs to fill in story and exposition. It's one thing to have a beautiful song that informs us of how a character feels, and that's exposition, and that's filling in some runtime too. Like, imagine this movie without these songs. Instead of a 2-hour film, you might be looking at 2.5 to 3 hours, because music can do something emotionally that without it takes a long time to kind of make that impression on the audience. It's the perfect substitute for story. And the letter song does a great job of that, because by the end of that song, we've kind of established that the letters have been going on for a while. Without the song, suddenly we're trying to branch all these scenes, and maybe you could do it in a montage. That's effectively
montage.
Or it would take a lot of back and forth moments of, and this letter says this and this letter says that, and how do you feel about him now? And like, no, we can do all of that in one simple song, and carry the audience away for the reason they usually buy the ticket. I was a bystander in that drive-by, and so happily by the end of it, of course. And so at the end of this song, there's this great exchange. Like the song wraps up, and we go into this scene with Cyrano and Roxanne, and she's so thrilled and just so in love with this guy. And Cyrano says, "I'm pleased for you." And she's like, "Are you really?" And he asks, "Why wouldn't I be?" And I love that little "why wouldn't I be?" because it's him testing to see if maybe she knows about his love after all. And he's still kind of hoping that she's going to see through it all and see him. Of course she doesn't. And she's like, well, listening to someone go on about their own love life is probably tedious for others. And, it's like, okay, not yet, and if you just pay attention to his dialogue from the moment of the bakery on, he does that a lot. He's constantly testing her to see, does she know? Will she pick up on the signs and signals? No. Okay. He really needs to step up and confess, which we'll certainly be coming back to. From that moment, though, the whole letter sequence, she moves into, I need to see him. I need to, see him in person. Of course, Christian blunders the in-person meeting, the romance there. And from there, he lets Cyrano take the reins, right, in person. And that's the famous classic scene of Roxanne at the balcony, which for me, I love this balcony scene more than Romeo and Juliet. That's heresy, I know, but I think it's so much more relatable and honest. It's all about what you can't say and how hard it is to say what you're trying to say. As opposed to Romeo and Juliet is all about confessing and thriving in the love that you found. And that's cool. I think I relate more to Roxanne and Cyrano. It's just so good. But we see this beautiful moment of Roxanne and Cyrano confessing their love to each other, finally, right? And we're one step closer to them being with each other, and yet still so far away, because up until this point, the letters have been between them, and it's confession of love, but from a distance. Now we're just inside of each other, but he still can't quite cross that boundary. And yeah, I really love it because we're starting to see the true connection between them. And of course, we're more and more feeling further and further away from a happy resolution, because there's also this great reaction shots that they give to Christian. And I think the most powerful edits in a movie are usually not the person talking, it's who's reacting to what they're saying. And so finding ways to let your characters respond and react to what's being said is so much more communicative than words. And it's, why would we not utilize that if it's a film? And this is where sloppy exposition is so frustrating, because a reaction speaks so much more to an audience. Whereas saying it, is not, it removes, it steals emotional resonance. And so watching the light bulb begin to dim and fade on while Christian is watching Cyrano sing his heart out, and he's like, what is this? What is happening now? And so it's beautiful. So that by the time the light bulb fully goes on, it's not by surprise. It's not sudden. There has been some steps, some gradualness to it.
And he said he knew it.
Yeah, that's right. And that was the moment he really knew, but he was still too smitten with Roxanne probably to let his mind go too far in that direction.
Exactly.
Yeah. From there, we go to immediately Christian and Roxanne marry, to immediately they get sent off to war. Christian and Cyrano, not Christian and Roxanne, Christian and Cyrano go to war. And of course, that's where the confession happens to, well, maybe not a confession, but the revelation of Christian finding out Cyrano loves her with the tears on the page is so good. And at this point, there's this little moment where Christian is searching for a word. It's our moral. We have to tell her it's our moral. And Cyrano starts to fill in the word, and he covers his mouth and he says obligation, right? Covering Cyrano's mouth is perfect because it's symbolizing that Christian is no longer going to let Cyrano speak for him. He speaks for himself now. And of course, he immediately, rides off to his death. And structurally, we go from that to Cyrano confessing his love, to discover he misjudged her character, and then he dies. And it's very, very bitter, but it's perfect. It's tragic. And it's so nice to have a tragedy on screen, because I think society loves too many of these Disney-fied films where everything ends well, where, Cyrano and Roxanne ride off into the sunset together. And you know what? Everything's going to be okay. And I think it's important to have these kinds of films, because we need to sit with this in our soul to feel like, I might die. What if I don't do X? Take the risk. I might die. And it could have been. Cyrano died with still out experiencing the love that Roxanne had for him. And he stole that from Roxanne.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. How do you feel about tragedies? Do you think we actually do have enough of them? Maybe that escapism is good, and we're good at the ratio of happy endings to bitter sweet lessons, because I think that's the importance of a tragedy, is giving a lesson that's emotionally destructive to an audience to encourage you to pursue something. How do you feel about that?
I love tragedies. I think we need more of them. I think part of the thing that I can't relate to a lot of music today is that it's way too happy, and it's fine. It's fine. And and in movies, I feel the same way. I feel like there has to be a cost to things, and because everything costs. And I think there's just something about a tragedy that reminds you that life in general doesn't guarantee anything, and that while you might expect an outcome, you don't always get it. And in fact, maybe it's better that you don't in some cases. It's just a reminder of those kinds of things. So having everything be just a happy ending all the time, I think is too much, but having everything be a tragedy is also too much, because life does work out sometimes, and things do, and we having a good positive ending can also inspire people to, I'm going to tell her, I'm going to tell her how I feel, because, hey, it worked for Cyrano, not in this case, obviously, but kind of. But I just love tragedies. I love there being a cost to things. It makes it feel much more real. It also, for lack of a better way to say it, misery loves company. And I think in a lot of ways, a lot of us, especially the older we get, feel like either maybe if we made a different decision, or if we, our life would be better if this or if that, and seeing other people, because we're all, we're also in this social society, right, where we see everybody happy on Instagram all the time and all that stuff. But really, life is hard, and it's struggle, and it's loss, and it's failure, and reminding people of that in something like a film, I think is super important, and actually makes you happy, which is weird. It's a little weird, but it's also, I kind of get it. Like if I watch something and it's a tragedy, I'm not happy that those people went through that, but it does put in perspective my own life, right? Or my own decisions or something, because I'm a viewer. I cannot help but relate myself to one or many of the characters that I'm watching. And so if they fail or they didn't try at something, well, then I should try, like he failed and he didn't try. Okay. I don't want to be that. So maybe I should try, or he tried and failed. Well, at least he tried, man, I should try. Like that's much more inspiring than it all working out, to me. So I love tragedy. I think you're the same way though.
Yeah, same. Like
Okay.
well said, man. I think one of the beautiful contrasts of this film, and the more I think you can create contrast in your characters, the stronger things start to pop out, because you have these two characters, Christian and Cyrano, who are so brave. They're so brave. They risk violence. They risk their lives. They go to war. And yet they're such cowards in love. Mm-hmm. And it's such a beautiful idea to think that there's these men who'd rather take a bullet to the heart that kills them, and instead of risk an invisible one to their heart that they just have to be vulnerable to and exist after taking. Like vulnerability is so much more difficult than fighting.
It really is. Yes.
So just beautiful setup, beautiful execution. Yeah, huge fan of tragedies for all the reasons you just said. Yes, life is hard and we need reprieve in some of these stories, but there is something beautiful. And I think if we looked out through our history, globally, probably the best films that survive the test of time are tragedies. Like are things where we feel deeply and are deeply upset that it didn't go the way we wanted them to. And I could stand a few.
You might not have
more
heard of Midsummer Night's Dream, but you know about Romeo and Juliet.
That's right.
You know everything that happens about Romeo and Juliet. And it has nothing to do, it might have something to do with the Leo version, but even if it doesn't, you still know the story,
Yeah, it survives for a reason. Final thoughts. It sounds like you were kind of divided on how much you actually enjoyed this as a movie. Probably not so much, but just as a decently executed musical on screen a little bit.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to put it. Is like, if I was watching this as a movie, no, I'd see a bunch of stuff where I was like, I don't why they do that or whatever. But I think that the point of this, at least it felt like to me, was to pay an homage to the stage play. Oh. And I think that they did that in spades. Right. And not all the music hit for me, but when it did, it really did. I mean, I'll say that the moments in the cave with Glenn Hansard and Heaven is Wherever I Fall, that track like just melted me like not many songs on screen ever have. I mean, it's so funny because one of the only other times where I could say that it did was also had Glenn Hansard on screen. So
maybe we need to work with Glenn Hansard.
I think we absolutely do. I mean, yes, that guy. I mean, but anyway, I think that like Peter Dinklage's performance is fantastic. Hearing him sing is amazing, and I love that. And the execution and adding not just a bunch of white people and then not calling it out. I loved that. I did feel like, oh man, 2 hours, felt a little bit long to me, but I also didn't mind it in the end because I thought I got some really good moments that, I wouldn't want to be on the chopping block for sure. Yeah. So it was worth it for sure. Yeah.
Nice. Same. I really do feel largely the same. For me, it does work as a movie. I can sit here and watch it but I do have to overcome some of the hurdles. Like there's, if you remove all the songs and just look at the dialogue, probably 30% of the dialogue still has a very stage-like delivery and execution. Yeah. And it's that thing where you're still overdoing it. You're over preparing it. I think it was either Scorsese or Spielberg call it bedroom dialogue, where you prepare this thing in the bedroom and then you get on set and you do it just perfectly. It's that. Whereas for me, the stuff that I love in film is it's under delivered. It's, has a little bit of chaos in the delivery, in the sense that the actor might be surprised they said it that way and it didn't feel right. That's probably the good stuff, is when it doesn't feel right, because that's humans. Every time you've ever rehearsed a speech to someone in your head and gone to deliver it, it's gone awry. Like it did not come out the way you intended. And that's the good stuff. And so there's these moments where it's just to himself, when people are really just talking for their own sake of hearing what they have to say. Those are the beautiful moments, you know, when Cyrano is getting ready to march off to war, and he's still at the foot of the balcony, and Roxanne is telling him, you know, don't let him be cold. And he's like, I can't promise you that. I can't promise you that either. And then she's like, well, you know, make sure he writes me. And we just sit, watch him process it, because we already know. And he's like, that I can promise you. And he just says it to himself. Those are these very strong moments to me. That's like, that's film. That's what film does well. And I don't know if there's just something inherent about adapting a stage play that like interrupts that process. But I wish, you know, we could see more of that, of less of the stage aspect and more of what film does well, which is getting you into someone's personal space, where it is just these very small comments to one another. Like that's so engaging and you know, heartfelt for sure to me anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I was just thinking about the scene when they were marching off into war where Cyrano gets shot, how you never see the other side because they're marching into fog. I thought that was really cool. That was like something that you would do in a play. You know what I mean? Yeah. On a stage. Because you don't have room to show, you know, everybody, like
armies.
both sides really. Yeah, exactly. So
no,
anyway,
that's a good point. I don't even know if they ever tell us what country we're in. Like we're kind of assuming England or France, but they don't say. Even whenever he addresses a letter that he mails to her on the enemy side, it just says Roxanne. It doesn't give an address at all. And so it's just kind of left up to you. They use red and white, which is in like every country's flag in that era. And so it could be anything.
I mean, Cyrano is French.
Oh, he is
France.
Oh,
he is France. Yeah, he is actually like a real life French writer.
Ah, okay. I didn't know that. I know they use all these French names like Valvert and de Guiche, but like Roxanne and Christian don't sound particularly frog.
Yeah, great point. It was back in 1600s, but then the stage play was written in like the late 1800s.
Yeah, like 1897, I think is what I read.
But it's based in France.
Yeah, nice. Well done, sir. What are you going to recommend this week?
I mean, I'm gonna go, you know, on the nose.
I already know.
And recommend Roxanne.
Yeah.
Yes, which is Steve Martin's comedic version of this from 1987, which is a fantastic film. Let me just say, Steve Martin crushes in this movie, and the way that they turn this story, into a comedy is brilliant. It's just brilliant. In fact, and it makes me want to go watch it today, because I just remember watching this as a kid and laughing my butt off, you know, but also being heartbroken a little bit at the same time. And it just, and then felt good, you know, like it was just really, Steve Martin is just a genius, an all-time genius. And I mean, some of his films you question, like, why'd you do that? But for the most part, like, I just love seeing him on screen. He's hilarious, and he does a great job at adapting this story. So Roxanne, yeah.
Nice. I actually considered recommending that one too. Like, I grew up on this movie, and the extent of knowledge of this play comes from that movie. In fact,
agreed.
To the point of, I just assumed that was the flaw of the character. I still don't even know if this version of Cyrano is accurate. But I can still remember certain moments, certainly the balcony scene and Roxanne, but even in the opening sequence of when we meet quote unquote Cyrano, this version of Cyrano, and the pictures. Do you remember the photographs that he's looking at?
Yes.
It's so good. Yeah. Steve Martin is a freaking genius. So double that recommendation. I am going to recommend if you're watching this and you're like, man, Kelvin Harrison Jr. is so good. Can he bring it? Does he got anything else in the tank? He does. I'm going to recommend a movie that he does called Waves. And I was split on this. The story is so good. All the acting is so good. The first half of the movie, they're doing some interesting, but I think overwrought things with the camera. And so it's a little dicey, but it still works. It still really, really works. It's a great movie. It also has Taylor Russell in it, and she is also amazing. And so if you just want to see another film with Kelvin Harrison Jr., you should absolutely check out Waves. Yeah, good drama. Yeah, stay tuned for next week. We're going to go back to the Aronofsky playbook and take a look at a little film called The Fountain. And yeah, it's got Hugh Jackman and Rachel Weisz and probably one or two other people, but that's certainly the duo headlining that thing. And so yeah, I don't know if it's streaming. I assume it's streaming somewhere. If not, you can buy it for like $2 on like YouTube or Google Play. Yeah, so stay tuned for that. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, drop us a review, subscribe, leave us a note. If there's something you want us to cover, a film that we haven't touched on yet that you want to do. We have a couple coming up that I'm really excited about. And yeah, so check in. If you want to comment on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/Cyrano.
And our quote of the day today is from Leo Tolstoy. Everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself. That's great. That's so good. That's so good. It reminds me of the little thing I sent earlier of like how you can, I sent to you and Scott, I think, of how you can, the multiple different worlds and multiple different versions. And if you change yourself, you can like literally go into a different version of, or a different universe almost, right? A parallel universe where the world is different, but you've only changed yourself. That's a script right there.
It really is. It really is. Like Leo Tolstoy obviously he's written some incredible works around the same time of Cyrano being created. And if anyone knows about tragedy, Tolstoy is probably number one on the list. And I think this is just so good to apply to Cyrano, because everything that he was trying to do was really outside of his power. The one thing within his power was to just have courage and to trust her. And he just refused to do it until his last day. It doesn't really take a lot of courage on your dying, breath to confess what you really feel or what you really wish you'd done differently, because you don't have to stick around for the consequences. It takes a lot of courage to step out on a limb when you still got another 50 years left in you, or even just another 6 months. Like it takes so much more courage to see the results of your risk. And so I love applying this kind of idea to Cyrano and maybe to our lives, because I love it. Man, well said. Like changing yourself will feel like you're changing the world all around you, and to a certain extent, you really are.
Yeah, because your world is what you see it as.
Yeah.
Amazing. A lot of thought in there.
Lots.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Great insights there, Wes, on all those things. I love talking about this stuff. I could talk about it all day. If you like what we're doing, please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Make a suggestion if there's a film that you'd like to see us peel apart. We'd love to hear from you. And share us with your friends. It all helps. Until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.